Hello again, everybody. I'm awakening my channel again, and I thought a great way to do it is to go to Reddit and ask people to send me some questions. Ask an expert. And one of the most upvoted questions was this: if I took chess at the age of 30, how good can I realistically get? Adult improvers, welcome to the show. I know you got into chess after the Queen's Gambit, after COVID. You start loving this game, but you started at a later stage and you're afraid that you might not attain a higher level of expertise. How likely is it scientifically to reach, let's say, a master level when you start the game that late? In this video, I will show you what we know scientifically, the best evidence for that answer, and I will give you some bad news and some good news, and I will end up in a good note. I will also show you some positions. When I'm talking about scientific evidence, you can have a chance to solve those positions if you are getting bored. Okay, so let's begin with defining chess expertise, right? What makes a chess expert? After years of study and evidence and data, look at this piece. This is by Adrian de Groot. This is from 1946, right? What we know right now, what separates chess experts is mostly their perception. They perceive the chessboard differently than us amateurs. Or, well, I'm a candidate master myself, but even between candidate master and grandmaster, there are differences. For example, de Groot said in his thesis that what takes a master, super GM, to see in 5 seconds, understand, candidate masters need to spend 15 minutes. That was the most surprising finding, that masters don't necessarily search deeper than low-rate players, but they see great opportunities instantly. And that's also the thing with other domains, by the way, right? In other domains of expertise, what separates an expert is this instant understanding of the gist and the key elements of the situation. Same in chess. Why is this the case? Because over the years they accumulated so many chunks and patterns. For example, here, tell me what should white play? Well, I'm sure you see this one before. Congratulations, it's an Anastasia's mate on the board, folks, yeah? Anastasia's mate, and the king gets mated. If you've never seen Anastasia mate before in your life, it's difficult for you to find this move, right? It's very difficult for you to find this resource. But once you know this pattern, it becomes easier. It becomes easier to execute. It's just an effortless process. And that's also the reason why chess masters, right, are great in bullet, blitz, and even simultaneous exhibitions, because they can instantly understand the most relevant point in a position. Okay, so what is the relevance to this for our discussion? It's learning these chunks is time consuming. You need thousands and thousands and thousands of such patterns to become an expert in chess, right? That's why it's not easy. Not everyone can become a chess expert. So that's part of the bad news, you see. In fact, if you look at the scientific evidence, there's a critical age of 12, apparently, right? So if you start playing chess seriously before the age of 12, then you have a 24% of chance of reaching an IM or GM level, compared to only 2% of a chance that if you start after the age of 12, you see. But I'm talking about international master and grandmaster titles, so keep that in mind. Because the good news is that if your goal is to reach 2000 ELO rating, then it's fine. Even if you start after the age of 12, if you're serious about your chess, then there might be a 55% chance that you might reach that level, compared to 76% of a chance for those players who start before the age of 12, you see? So this is the best scientific evidence so far that we know. This was done by Argentinian players, this study, right? But we don't know exactly what type of training they had. This was a questionnaire study, right? So we don't know exactly what they were doing for their solitary exercise and training in chess. And that's also part of the good news, because maybe if you train smartly, right, if you got the right technique and methods, then you can speed up this process. Okay? So, talking about patterns and chunks, it's not only a checkmate pattern that you need to know, right? You need to know many tactical patterns or even positional patterns. For example, look at this position, it's white to play, and I'm talking about other studies, right? You can try to find the best move for white. So this Argentinian study I just mentioned, right? So they looked at how many hours it takes to reach a candidate master level, 2200 level rating. There was a huge variation. So it's not only total amount of hours you spent on chess, right? For example, some players spend 22 times more, 22 times more hours on chess study to reach a candidate master level compared to the fastest player. That's an incredible level of variation, guys. Because if you really look at the deliberate practice approach, they say it doesn't matter. Talent doesn't matter. It's only serious study, serious amount of practice, usually 10 years of deliberate practice that explains the expertise. But it's not so easy to conclude this for chess. Now, there are two caveats here because we don't know exactly what they were doing in that, let's say, 22,000 hours or more that, slowest player actually took, right? We don't know exactly what he did. Only thing he reported us in his questionnaire, right, was that he was doing some chess on a solitary basis. And there we need data scientifically. We need to be much more precise and compare different training techniques, right? Because every coach will tell you something right now, but we have no real scientific evidence that compare different training methods in chess. And that might be the next step. That might be something that I would love to do in the future as a PhD in cognitive science. Keep that in mind. And that's also partly good news, right? Talent is also important in chess. Look at Magnus Carlsen, right? He didn't need to spend that much time compared to his peers to reach the grandmaster level. And, right, he was already very special as a kid. He, for example, memorized all the flags of all the countries in the world, all the area sizes, all the municipality names in Norway, everything, right? So I think talent is also playing a role. It might, for example, start from something small. For example, maybe Magnus can learn those chess chunks and patterns a little bit faster than his peers. And over time, because you need thousands of chess patterns to know, right? Over time, it might give a huge difference, right? Like a butterfly effect. Yeah, you can understand. Such small differences can make a huge difference in the end. Keep that in mind also, folks. I hope you're a talented chess player. That always helps. But of course, talent is also not the whole story. This position, of course, is the right move is f4 because your knight wants to improve, right? So this was a positional puzzle, and chess masters, they instantly understand that their knight stands terribly here and they want to improve the piece. So congratulations if f4 came naturally to you, right? So again, you need to work on your positional patterns. For example, this position, I made a course about this on Chessable, the art of awakening pieces. White to play, folks. So again, as I said, we need more effective study methods to actually increase the rate of speeding up this process, right? So also, the good news is this, recently, the process seems to be speeding up. Current masters, they don't seem to be needing 10 years of solitary practice to become masters. The process is getting faster, and there might be several reasons for this, right? One reason might be an overall rise of general intelligence in human population. The other reason might, of course, obviously be the right effective training techniques. For example, Chessable or some other websites allow you to instantly and easily practice chess, or more tournament opportunities is the final reason, perhaps. Yeah, so that's also a good news, folks. We are living in right time to actually attain chess expertise. In this position, of course, once you look deeper, your knight is buried by the pawn at f6, so white plays g5 and awakens the knight to e5, right? Again, masters see this instantly, effortlessly, and as you also become better in chess, as you accumulate those chunks and patterns, as you learn those patterns, you also will become much more efficient in finding those. Again, look at this position, it's black to move. I'm talking about chess patterns and chunks. We also need to talk about typical ideas from your openings, right? Because that's also, you should be smart when you study your openings, yeah? You need to know the general patterns and themes that are likely to occur in your openings. This is also great for chunking theory because you limit the potential options. You increase your chances that you saw that pattern before in your life, right? And you look at model games, for example. You look at classical games in your openings. So while you're pondering about the best move for black, I will also tell you one more thing. Rubinstein, for example, he started chess when he was 14 and he became one of the top players in the world, you see? So there's variation in the human population. Of course, Rubinstein says he always had the talent for chess. He was memorizing, he was great in, for example, remembering all of his games. But that's interesting because that memory doesn't translate to other domains, right? Chess masters have great memory for chess positions, but that doesn't mean that they're great in remembering random stuff in other domains of life. And that's also what you see in most other areas, domains of expertise. That's a domain-specific expertise area, okay? Okay, and also Chessable, by the way, Chessable, if you go to Chessable forums, I will share a link for you on this YouTube video, right? There's a thread on the inspiring adult improvers. You can find inspiration there, folks, if you go through the list, because they listed so many players all around the world that inspire people. Late starters, right? They reach a certain level, they became masters, for example, and you can see all the information, updated information there in that post. This position, black to play. Neither of players, bam, rook c3. It's called the Soviet sack. And you play this move without even much calculation because that's a pattern that you saw before. The idea is, of course, is to weaken the white king, right? The typical exchange sacrifice, because this position is totally about the king's safety, because the kings are standing on opposite flanks, right? So the understanding is very important here, and you have to speed up your attack, go for piece activity, go for the king. So this rook c3 basically is another pattern, attacking pattern, that can also arise in your openings. And again, if you ask Magnus Carlsen this position, if you give this to Magnus Carlsen, he gives rook c3 in like millisecond, yeah, 5 milliseconds. He sees rook c3 and he sees as a great option for black, right? Of course, he needs time to double check his calculations, but this is instantly visible to a master, this idea. And you also need to be attaining such levels by careful study and accumulating of such patterns, okay? Now, finally, what I do with my coaching sessions, that's also important for training. I'm giving epistemic feedback to my students because that's also important. Coach's role is to identify the mistakes, let the student discover those mistakes, we discuss together, and I explain to the student, for example, when there's a big mistake that is happening, and they could be, for example, strategic mistakes, as in this case. It's white to move, by the way, folks, and tell me what's the best plan for white. What are you seeing in this position? Because I will show you a chess crime, which happened in the game, okay? And the role of a coach is to let the student be aware of those mistakes, of those issues, and take actions to solve those issues by careful training, right technique, right positions, and that's also very important. Because in this case, white played h3, which is a total chess crime, because he's only accelerating black's attack on the king side instead of going for a direct push on the queen side, right? So for example, this is by far the most logical move for white here because there's an attack on the queen side. Why? Because this position is totally about kings on opposite flanks, and this understanding is the key, of course. What is the gist of this position? Masters can see the gist instantly by looking at the king's locations, right? So, and of course, speed and timing is so important in such positions. And if you go h3, you lose time and you actually accelerate the opponent's push on the king's side, and you get you get destroyed after 3 moves, basically. Something like this is very likely to happen, and white's already lost. You see, so h3 moves like h3, chess crimes, should be explained, and that's why I made a course on this on Chessable. It's called Chess Crime and Punishment. So by careful analysis of your own games, for example, you can gain information about yourself, and this is great. This is great feedback that you can fix. You can take directed actions to solve specific problems. And here a coach is useful because I can verbally explain to you why this move is terrible. Why this move is terrible and beautiful mistake. Because if you look at the engine, you don't have the same information. Engine, of course, will tell this move is wrong, but it doesn't explain to you why deeply, all the points, why it was wrong. Okay, so this is one way that you can fix your problems, adult improvers. And finally, right, patterns and chunks are not enough. You also need to work on your fundamental thought processes. In this position, for example, white goes h5. Black has so much extra material. Black has an extra queen. Look at this. Black should be winning this position, right? But the opponent just played h5. And now you tell me, what should black do, folks? And this is totally about the fundamental and automatized thought processes. that whenever your opponent makes a move, you must see the threat. You must ask yourself, am I facing a threat right now? Right? If I don't make a move, what will be their next move? And now you're talking about recurring patterns. Of course, you just basically you will allow h takes g6 mate if you don't do anything. So there's a huge threat in the position right now. And if you take the pawn, you get mated anyways, right? So despite the material advantage, black must be careful. And the way to do it, the most logical move is g5. Because if you go g5, this rook is sleeping on the h file. And there's no mate, and black will soon go queen c2, and the game is over. This shows that, because that's a typical way that amateurs lose games, I see it myself as a coach, right? That this fundamental process might be missing in your game, right? And that's great information. It's almost like a driver license, right? Like in most countries, you can't just make, 10% errors and still get your driving license. The room for mistake is so low because it will be so risky to make such fundamental mistakes that they don't give you a driver license if you make, let's say, 10% mistakes. Also in the game, imagine that in your real game, that you make such not seeing threat kind of mistakes. Let's say in 10% of your games, right? 10% of the positions. Well, then you're exposing yourself to disasters like this, right? I've seen it myself, that this really hurts. This way of losing games really hurt. So if you notice such patterns, you must also be very diligently working on these fundamentals. You will raise your floor, right? So you will stop giving up games like that so easily. And imagine what a difference that will make to your game, right? So these kind of processes, folks, are what makes chess great and interesting. And on top of everything, never forget one thing when you want to improve. It's about motivation, it's about joy, it's about the growth mindset that predicts, because that's a long-term grind, right? You need time to get those patterns in. There's no rush. You need time to gain expertise in chess, but never forget to love the game, because the game is so pure, so honest, so beautiful, and it's all about this growth mindset. We should accept mistakes. We should be happy about our mistakes, right? Because mistakes, our own mistakes, are showing us pathways to improve and fix those problems. We should seek guidance and feedback from experts, right, to fix our mistakes. We should be having peace with our mistakes, because it's all about the long term, and grit also is very important. You should have this grit of this long-term goal and long-term stubbornness to get better in this game that we all love. Okay, folks, so these are my final points of whether it's possible for starters, late starters, to attain a certain level. If you look at the real science, there are different arguments, right? But as I told you, 2000 ELO is not so unlikely if you give your best. And good news is that maybe I will do further research in the future about the right training methods. And if we also identify certain training methods as the best, as much better than the other ones, scientifically, right? You can also focus on those things. Of course, we have some gist. Of course, we have some intuition as chess experts or chess coaches. What works best, what doesn't work so properly. Of course, you should also rely on these general judgments. But I just gave you a general gist of what chess expertise looks like, what you should be focused on most, and what are the fundamental processes that you need to go through in this process. Thank you so much. I'm wishing you all the best for your chess journey, and stay with chess. Thanks.